All right. So as we think about the year end and some tax planning, one of the questions that comes up often with our clients is about gifting. When is gifting appropriate? How much is appropriate to give? And the answer that we like to give always is, it depends.
Depends.
It depends
Yep.
on your situation, but let's dive into some of the factors that we think about when an individual or a couple is thinking about gifting.
Yep. And today we're talking about gifting. A previous episode, we talked about charitable giving. So giving to a charity, making a donation. That's a lot of end of year discussions we have. Today, we're talking about gifting. We're talking about family, friends, using your resources while you're living to really benefit those around you. And we see all sorts of initial thoughts on this. Some families say, oh, I don't want to give my kids money now. I might need it. Or they might say, hey, they're doing great. I don't want to make it some like weird, they're beholden to me because I gave them a certain amount, or that they're going to expect me to do this every year.
Some people are so generous that they're not actually taking their own financial considerations into priority. So they may be currently healthy and in a great financial position, but they're not thinking about like their future self and how long their assets have to support them.
Yep. The other one we think a lot about is, especially when you have like grandparents who are seeing, our client being the grandparent generation, they're seeing their kids struggling. Life is expensive, life is difficult. They see their grandkids and they really want the best for them. They have good resources, but they're not sure how to just help financially in a way that doesn't feel like they're stepping on their kids or at all minimizing what they're doing. So we come out of this conversation of what do we do when you have resources and you want, or you're considering gifting to the next generation?
And there's a couple of different options. Just when we're just thinking about giving, let's just look at some strategies. So the first one is that before you have to actually file a tax form for gifting, you have a certain amount that it's called the gift tax exclusion, and every year it adjusts. But in 2025, the year that we're recording this podcast, it's $18,000 per recipient. So Jeremiah and I are married, and let's say we wanted to gift funds to a nephew. And so I could give this nephew $18,000. Jeremiah could give this nephew $18,000. I could give a niece, the nephew's sister, another $18,000. Jeremiah could give the niece another $18,000. So $36,000 total could come from our households to each recipient. And that's just kind of the max.
And in doing that, you don't have to file a tax return. You don't have to do, just as Laura said, you don't have to do anything. And so it's just a gift. You think this exclusion is set up for, you think of regular gifts, birthday gifts, Christmas gifts. The IRS is not looking for you to file taxes with each one of those. However, when you start making larger gifts in a given year, the IRS wants to know about it. And the reason they want to know about it is because when you give in addition to that $18,000, what it does is it takes your lifetime exclusion from estate taxes and it knocks it down just a little bit. Whatever you've given over the annual exclusion. Where people, I think some will be a little confused is sometimes they expect that if they were to give over the $18,000, it all of a sudden becomes taxable in that year to either the recipient or to themselves. And that's not how it's structured. So there's not a tax due immediately. It's that the lifetime exclusion is reduced. So currently, they just actually redid the laws, but it's roughly $30 million for a married couple. That they each are excluded from their estate from estate taxes at the end of life, these death taxes. And so if someone gave a little bit over that $18,000 this year, when they get to the end of life, instead of having $30 million available to be sheltered from estate tax exclusion, they would now have $29,950,000. It's a little bit that knocks it down. And for many, many households, this is not a valid consideration. It's not a big deal. They can knock that down a number of times. They can give all that they want to give, and it's not going to make an impact on their estate. For other households, this is a key part of their planning, is that they know their estate's going to be very large, and they want to use every single year, they want to use this annual exclusion to bring their estate down. But
it's most kind of a tactical approach. And that lifetime exclusion amount is just the current law. And so one of the things that we always have to stay up to date on is how long is that law good for, right? And the current rules in place are good until 2026. But then we'll have to see if the laws change, if they're updated, if they're renewed, or if that exclusion amount sunsets. And then all the estate planning attorneys will have to come up with some new planning.
Pivot again.
Keep informed. Ignorance is not bliss when it comes to
No, that's right. And they all get tied together. So when people are thinking about gifting, sometimes just in the moment, I want to gift somebody some money. Really what we where we kind of come in and overlay with our clients is we think of the longer term. Over the next 10 years, over the next 20 years, what is kind of a gifting philosophy, a gifting program that you might want to employ with your family? And an example here, we had a client, he was single and he had plenty of resources for himself. And he asked us to do kind of inverse planning of how much could I give away each year, whether it was to charities or to family members, and not run out of money, in the sense of, bring down his assets, but still have enough for himself. It was actually really a fun way of planning and looking at it, of saying he could be the uncle that says, you get some money and you get some money and you get some money every Christmas. But the discussion was, would people feel entitled? Would they be expecting this? Once he was confident he wasn't going to run out, how does he want to phrase this? So we talk a lot with clients, and there's a part where, like Laura, you said, it depends. Every family is different. And we've had a number of folks who are interested in gifting, but as we talk through this, they say, wow, if I just gave them the money to buy a house, but then they end up selling that house and use the money to buy a boat, wow, I'd be pretty frustrated with that. That's not really what I
Right.
want. And then we talk through better ways to potentially structure a gift if that's not what you want.
How are we attaching strings, right? So sometimes some gifts have some strings attached, and that's because you don't want to spoil the next generation before you teach them how to be good stewards of their money. And so there can be guardrails set up in terms of how you transfer those assets. A lot of times I think about a trust structure when I'm thinking about terms of gifting or passing on things to other members of your family. The other thing I think about is, if you're planning to give a gift, is there a specific purpose? And so for many grandparents, they want to help fund their kids' or grandkids' education. So here in California, we use 520s often if the purpose of the giving is for education. And those have a lot of rules, but generally speaking can be very flexible. So a 529 can be set up for the benefit of an individual. But if that individual doesn't utilize all those funds, there are some other options. You can either transfer those to another family member, yourself. They could eventually potentially convert into like a Roth for that individual. There's a lot of different ways to use those funds. So some flexibility. But if the overarching idea is to gift for the sake of providing education benefit, a 529 can sometimes be a great vehicle for that.
Yep, a good one. That's really good. The other one we see a lot, just as you talk about the specific items, another one we see a lot is buying a house. That people want to give a gift, usually like a down payment, to help usually it's their kids, get into a house. And they say, our kids can afford the mortgage payment. They're really excited here. It's going to be great for their family, but they just don't have the down payment. So we're thinking about gifting them the down payment so then they can get into this house. That's a common thing we've talked with many clients. And I like, Laura, you already said this once, but the first knee-jerk reaction is kind of like when you're flying. It says, like, secure your oxygen mask first, and then secure those of the others. It's one,
Mm-hmm.
can you afford it? Like, can you do that? Like, is that going to be okay with your planning? And then once we get up past that hurdle, then the question becomes, if you just gave it to them and they used it for a house, and 5 years later they sold the house and bought a boat, that example, are you okay with that? Is that something you wanted? If instead of gifting them, do you want to give them a really low or no interest loan that they can
Mm-hmm.
take the money, they can use it? But if they ever were to sell that house, you want the money to come back to you. So you helped them get in. That was the gift. You helped them get into the house, but you're looking for either your money to come back or even sharing some equity. All
I was
those are
just
good discussions.
I was just going to bring those up because the intra-family loans are very common. And most of the time when we talk to individuals about it, it's kind of done on a wink and a handshake. Tommy needed $20,000. Tommy's a great kid. He's hardworking. I wanted to help him get into his first house or buy his first car. So I loaned Tommy $20,000. Well, was there any interest on it? No. Okay. Well, you got to be aware, right, that maybe you gifted him
Right?
not just the
Does
amount of
Tommy,
$20,000, but the interest, right,
right?
that you could
Did,
have earned on
yeah,
that.
totally. Does Tommy know it was a loan and not a gift?
Does
That
Tommy know when you expect to get repaid or if you expect to get repaid?
Right. Right. And those are items that, it started off as a really generous moment, and it can turn into some really pretty significant strife of, if one
Mhm,
family member is feeling like they just haven't paid me back, they haven't paid me back. And the other family member, it's not even on their radar. They don't even
mhm.
know that that's expected or that it was. And so we encourage, whether or not it's a formal signed document. I think that's, on the attorney side, not that anyone's going to sue each other, but it just gives a lot of clarity, right? Here was the document we wrote down. Here's what we signed. So we both agreed to this, right? And that makes, in my mind, for families, makes it a lot easier to say, this is what we agreed to. And of course, we can amend it in the future. I can forgive it. We can do all sorts of things. But in this moment, we're agreeing to these terms, this payback date, all that.
I
And
have
even
a friend who says clear is kind, and I feel like I use that phrase all the time, that actually providing clarity is the kindest thing that you can do, and especially when it comes to a family member, right? Money, when you mix money and family, it's not always the best
yeah,
outcome.
it's
So,
harder, right? And we've talked about before on some of these shows. We have family meetings with a lot of our clients, and when I say a lot, I don't mean a lot of them. I mean a few of them, because there's a lot of
mhm,
families that can't have a family meeting. They don't have a healthy relationship with family by multiple generations, or healthy discussion with about money with family for multiple generations. So it's really the oddity that we find a really healthy family that can
mhm,
discuss these things. And same with lending. There's probably some families they give a handshake. Yep, I'll pay you back the money, and that's all they need to really do. It's taken care of. But I'd say for many families, either having a formalized loan document or even just a written down bullet point. Here's when I'll pay it back. Here's what I expect. Just so there's clarity. I think is so useful.
yeah. I mean, if anything, it could be redundant, but at least it's in writing somewhere for multiple people to reference. The other one, speaking of taxes, which we were talking about earlier, is some people, we were just having this conversation with a client not too long ago. You can actually gift equities. So you could gift a stock from your portfolio or a holding from your portfolio to another individual without having to liquidate that stock. And as everybody knows, once you liquidate the stock, that's a taxable event. You have a realized gain or loss. So when you go to gift that Apple stock that you've hung on to for 50 years and it's now worth a lot, you are also gifting your cost basis. So you don't get out of those taxes. So even though for you to share that asset with someone else, you're giving them the full value, the full market value, you are also gifting them your cost basis. So when they go to liquidate that share in the future, they are then liable to pay the capital gain or loss. In this case, it would more than likely be a gain on that Apple
Yeah.
stocks.
Yeah, and we had a client that received a generous gift from a family member, and they were excited to receive it. It was very kind of them, but we had to talk through and say, you're thinking about this number, but really after you pay your taxes, is actually this number is what's going to be usable. And
Hmm.
just one other piece, that's good to know as people think about gifting. The other thing about gifting that I think is really good for anyone to think through is, this is what we're thinking about doing today. We're buying. Would you say Tom or Todd? We're helping Todd buy
Tom,
a
I
house,
think.
or Tom. We're helping Tom buy a house. Well, what happens when the next child, Susie, is going to buy a house? Are you going to gift to them because that's now a thing that you do as a family? Is it no, you're doing fine. Tom wasn't doing fine, so that's what thinking through if you have multiple kids or multiple nieces, how you want this to relate to all of them or none of them. And
Right.
then what happens when they buy their second house or their third house or their fourth house? And really just thinking through, is this something that you want to be part of your family dynamic? We do this. This is a thing that we do. We help the kids get into houses. Or is it really just a one off? And having that clarity in your own mind so that you can express it to the rest of the family,
Yep.
if that's appropriate. But
It's
to
like
really have that
individuals
thought.
that commit to putting their kids' names, like they get them tattooed. And I've always thought, like, did you know how many kids you were going to have? And were you ready to commit that to all your children?
I like
Sometimes,
we have 4 kids, so I like how you realize, like, oh, this is just a line of kids going down the.
right? It could be endless. So, anyways, yeah, what you do for one, you don't necessarily have to do for another. But if you don't, then, what sort of hopefully not animosity, but like what are you creating there in terms of your family? And if it's important for you to be fair or equitable as you think about gifting, you want to think about not just for that individual, but for your whole family, because as we all know, family dynamics change sometimes unexpectedly. I love the illustration that you brought up about the oxygen mask first. And this is part of the work that we do as financial planners when we sit down and we utilize the software and the different tools that are available to us. We're trying to create a picture in time over a person's net worth, but we're also trying to pressure test that to see what does that look like over time for the duration of your expected or anticipated lifestyle. So we deal with a lot of averages and metrics, but we're trying to derive what are your needs, and in the event of lots of different circumstances, markets take a major downturn, inflation has a major increase, you have added expenses for long term healthcare at the end of your life, right? So we want to pressure test your plan to make sure that you are keeping your oxygen mask on first. And if you have more, right? Excess, certainly, like we love to have these conversations about giving, and we talk about charitable giving, just like Jeremiah was talking about, and then also gifting to your family. But I think to consider that illustration, let's make sure you have your oxygen mask on first. And that, in my opinion, requires a good, robust financial plan.
Yep, that's right. And I would say as we're, kind of rounding this out, I'd say where a lot of our clients land is less on giving like a monthly amount for their regular needs. Most of our clients are not saying I'm going to give a stipend to my children to help them buy groceries and food and things like that. They're usually, you're not giving that. Recently, I'd say a lot of our clients aren't even giving big chunks for, buying a house or kind of those lifestyle adjustments. What they usually settle on is, I'd love to see the grandkids more. I'd love for my kids to be able to get away and spend time with them as well. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to fund an adventure. And so we're going to rent a cabin in the mountains. And if any of the kids can take off time from work, we'll pay for everything. They'll just come and be here for a week. And we've seen a lot of our clients kind of allow a vacation that their kids couldn't afford themselves, wouldn't take themselves, but they want to provide that as a moment for the family to get together to build some kind of community there. And so kind of funding experiences, funding excursions, we tend to see that more than, funding basic needs, and lately more than even funding, upgraded houses or cars or things like that. It's
Right.
not a right or wrong. It's just what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and the other thought I want to land out there too is that oftentimes people think like, well, I'm going to save that. I'm not going to gift during my life, and I'm just going to wait to do it all after my life. And that is totally a reasonable plan for many people. But I still think having the conversation with those who are set to inherit a small or a large amount from you, just so that they can be prepared. And that conversation naturally lends towards stewardship of those funds, your desire for the use of those funds, your desire for how it might bless or impact their lives. And that's a really beautiful and sweet exchange for many people, not for all. And so, even though the conversation isn't something you plan to have every day, right? It's not your typical chit chat or your conversation at the Thanksgiving dinner table, but to plan a meaningful time to have some of those conversations with your family members if you do expect to either have money left over or to start gifting during your life. I think that there can be lots of benefit. Again, clear is kind. I'm going to go
Yeah,
back to that
there's
one.
kind. Well, even that legacy, as you're saying, that legacy can be so many different things. It can be legacy at the end. I gave a big chunk when I passed away. It can be I got my kids and grandkids through these different seasons. Yeah, there's a lot of it. And I think a vision is what you want your money to do. And once you kind of got the sense of your oxygen mask, right? I'm going to be okay. Really forming a good vision, whether it's family focused or others focused or whatever it may be. I think it's really a beautiful way to have a guiding light that then helps inform your giving as you go forward.
Yep, absolutely. So, just a couple of things just to recap what we've talking about. So, give generously, but maybe consider some guardrails, right? It's okay to gift with some strings attached. Make sure that you put your oxygen mask on first, and that when making gifts, clarity is always the best policy, especially if it's an intra-family loan. And just a call to action here. Obviously, it's what we do every day. It's near and dear to our heart. But one of the benefits of having a financial plan that's been pressure tested and is clear and is actionable is then you have the freedom to relieve assets from your portfolio that you know are not needed for your base needs. And so you get to consider some gifting options. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
I think we've got it. I think, gift, all these end of year items I like, the taxes, the gifting, how do you really tune up to make sure you're, paying what you need to be paying, being strategic, and also making sure that your resources line up with your values.
Absolutely. To all our listeners, thanks so much for listening today, folks. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.